You get what you vote for. While this book has been highly, yet constructively, critical of women, in full intellectual honesty, most American men are equally worthless. They're living at home, collecting a government check, getting fat, they have no ambition, no driver's license, no savings, and no game plan for what they're going to do with their lives. Furthermore, bad as it is for society and women to not want to have anything to do with men, it technically doesn't excuse men from throwing in the towel and not doing anything with their lives, because you still exist. You still need to do something. For all the rejected males in society, why aren't they climbing mountains, doing great works, getting advanced degrees, going on adventures, or simply hitting the gym, if for any other reason than the intellectual stimulation it generates, or at least to stave off an existential crisis? This shows, when given the choice, most men today are indeed lazy and by definition worthless, as most choose a life of sloth, gluttony, pity, and parasitism over a life of meaning, purpose, production, and adventure. But who gave them this choice? Remove for a second the demoralizing effects of telling men they're not needed. Remove, for the moment, the demotivating effects of women's general disinterest, even hatred of men. The threat of death found in the lower levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs should more than motivate men to get off their ass and find a job anyway. Hunger, starvation, cold, and homelessness should prompt men to at least be productive to the point they attain self-sufficiency and self-supportation. So why aren't they now? Why aren't they taking those $20 an hour jobs and putting food on the table, paying off their student loans, paying the rent, working extra shifts, all so they don't starve, die of cold, or get shanked in a homeless camp? The answer is simple: because they don't have to. And the reason they don't have to is because women have disproportionately voted in a welfare state. While this book does not wish to get into a banal argument about Republicans and Democrats, it's an undeniable fact that women disproportionately vote for security over freedom, while men generally vote the opposite. Over time, this has resulted in nearly every first world nation having a generous welfare state that pays for a basic level of living. Be it EBT, WIC, TANF, Obamacare, Section 8, student loan bailouts, or what have you, you don't really have to work in the U.S. if you don't want to. You throw on the added welfare programs offered by state and local governments, private charities, not to mention modern parents offering their own effective Section 8 program, allowing their 32-year-old son to live at home, and you have wholly eliminated any threats of starvation, homelessness, cold, or hunger. But in eliminating these threats, you have also effectively eliminated any negative reinforcement stick that would have otherwise forced these men to become productive members of society. Your basic college freshman Democrat socialist politics have merely enabled these men to remain parasitic boys. Now reintroduce the demotivating effects of women's general disinterest, even hatred of men. Not only have you removed the stick that would have turned these boys into men, but you've removed the carrot as well. And valid as the philosophical point is that men should still go out and pursue excellence in their lives anyway, the truth is such self-motivation is exceptionally rare, especially when facing the headwinds of a society that is dismissive or even hostile towards you. And so, with no stick and no carrot, these men simply exist, oftentimes at taxpayer expense, but not without an ironic cost to the women who created them. For example, a common frustration of women is that all the good men are taken, and they're not wrong. Good, quality men tend to be taken, so much so that married men make on average 70% more than their single male counterparts in every age group. But understand, this is because married men have to. With a wife to maintain and children to feed, married men were put in an environment where they had to develop a work ethic to earn more and become a higher quality man. But in voting in a welfare state, women have removed the need for men to develop a work ethic at all, either by extinguishing the original reason men needed to develop a work ethic, survival, or by letting deadbeat dads off the hook by paying for single mother households, father/husband. And so, when women complain they can't find a good man, it's probably because they voted to replace them with government checks decades ago. Related, women are starting to pay for more and more of men's welfare. As it stands right now, women collect more welfare than men do, but the gap is closing. This is in part due to men working less and sponging more, but what's really closing the gap is men claiming disability, specifically mental disability. Since 2002, the number of adult men collecting an SSI check for mental disability has increased 41%, while there was no increase among women. And when you look at younger men under 18, 2/3 of SSI recipients are male, while only a third is female. Source SSA.gov. This indicates the trend of men collecting a government check for being mentally disabled will increase, while women should remain the same. But whereas good intentions were no doubt the reason women voted in the politicians who would make things like autism, depression, BPD, and social anxiety qualify for disability, the problem is mental illness can be faked. A missing limb, blindness, or a crippled arm you can't fake. But being depressed just requires looking like Billie Eilish or being a millennial. Worse, this is after a decade-long increase in diagnoses, authentic or not, of things like autism, Asperger's, ADHD, anxiety, etc., that laid the plausible premise these men were, in fact, disabled. And even worse than that, treating men like shit for 50 years has done nothing but increase the number of legitimate cases of mental illness among men. But regardless of the authenticity of these mental disability claims, and regardless of what government programs men are collecting checks from, as men bow out of society, it will be women who are increasingly on the hook for the welfare state they voted in. Not to mention the welfare checks of the men they enabled not to work. Tangentially related to this is an ironic and confusing desire of women to be a girl boss. If you look at either hours worked or the labor force participation rate for men, the trend of men has been to work less, not more, regardless of whether there was a welfare state or not. This is because work sucks. It isn't fun, and it is the antithesis of life. However, the education industry, corporate America, and the government have done an outstanding job hoodwinking women into thinking otherwise. They will go $150,000 into debt for a worthless MBA, slave away 60 hours a week at a job, 70 if you consider commute, pay overinflated rent to live in a downtown community, pay someone else to raise their kids, and confusingly vote to raise their own taxes. This would be fine, however, if it wasn't for one thing: affirmative action. Because in insisting on, or at least not voting to remove affirmative action, women are trying to muscle out and replace men, not merely work alongside them and may the best man win. This has two effects. First, it is arguably the single biggest deterrent for men to enter the workforce, let alone get training or education for a career. If the playing field is unfair, why put your heart and soul into it if they're just going to promote LaDasha because she's black and female? Second, this causes an exodus of men from the workforce. At first, women may welcome this development, but this means women will increasingly bear the burden of the entire economy, all of society, and certainly the welfare state. They'll be doing most of the work. And while today more men are working than women, current trends show women will be the majority of workers in the future. Steve Martin said in Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, "I say it's time for a change. I say let them give us money. Let's live off them for a while." That day is coming. Women will be the slaves the rest of us live off of, and they'll vote for it. On a hilarious flip side of this same coin is women's delusional, even comical expectations of finding a rich man while voting to take his money away. Without going into a long and detailed analysis of the IRS's revenue data, rich people, by far, pay the vast majority of taxes. Some, depending on the state you're living in, shelling out 45% of their income, 2/3 of which goes to pay for the welfare state the majority of women insist on having. But while women are emphatic about their leftist politics and how the rich need to pay more, in that very same breath, they will demand men make $100,000 a year or more to date them. Furthermore, most women don't realize they're voting away millions of men who would otherwise meet their income requirements if those men didn't have to shell out 40% of their paycheck for the welfare state. It also goes without saying, genuinely rich men tend to avoid Democratic women because why would you hang out with someone who votes to make you poorer? Alas, it remains a Scooby-Doo mystery to these lovelorn leftist women where all those elusive rich men have gone. Thankfully, there's plenty of single men living on welfare who agree with them politically. And finally, social conditioning. For the past 3 generations, women have been telling men what they think they wanted, not what they actually wanted. At first, it was an egalitarian man who was modern enough to accept feminism. Then it was the sensitive 90s man who was in touch with his feelings and was more feminine. Then it was the metrosexual who was kind of the same but dressed nicer and could get you into clubs. That was replaced with a man who held similar beliefs about pet causes like organic coffee, vegetarianism, or pacifism. This then morphed into having to vote Democrat or Hillary no matter what, which leads us to today, where the latest incarnation of What Women Want version 47.9 is now a male feminist who doesn't judge women's oftentimes horrific and life-destroying choices as he accepts her polyamorous lifestyle, neck tattoos, and 3 fatherless children. Meanwhile, what women really wanted is what they've always wanted the entire time. A tall, dark, handsome man, preferably jacked, with lots of money, who can violate her to the point she might pass out in ecstasy. The problem is, men listened and became exactly what women said they wanted, not what they actually wanted. So today, instead of the tall, dark, handsome, wealthy, jacked man every woman wants, they instead got exactly what they ask for: male Democrats. Weak, effeminate, emotional, and soft to the touch, the modern-day American soy boy is precisely what every woman said they wanted. A sensitive man who votes the right way, asks her permission to kiss her, is emotionally available, and dotes on her every wish and word. He's more than happy to do household chores because he couldn't repair a house or a car to save his life. He's against guns, but couldn't fight off a rapist if his girlfriend's life depended on it. And instead of supporting himself through hard work, majoring in engineering and disciplined financial management, he shares the all-important leftist politics of women, where he votes for UBI, student loan bailouts, and free health care. And don't get him started about the evils of toxic masculinity. He avoids the gym, preferring instead to practice the song he wrote for you on his acoustic guitar, titled, "Let's Share Our Pronouns." Sadly, this is perhaps where women hurt themselves the most, by ruining their men. They'll never admit it, but while they're not interested in your average man, deep down inside they want nothing more than an exceptional man who is responsible, stable, handsome, charming, and jacked. But instead of being honest about that and requiring men meet these standards, women lied to men about what they wanted due to politics and a desire to be polite. Politics in the form of feminism, where men were adamant they didn't need a man, even being shamed if they confessed they did. And politeness, where instead of telling men the truth, they lied to spare their feelings. Be that platitudes of, "You'll make some lucky girl really happy," or "just be yourself," or "be a good listener." Not once has a girl said, "lose weight and hit the gym and then I'll fuck you." The problem is, men are like nutmeg trees. It takes them about 25 years to mature and bear fruit. But if you don't water them correctly, give them enough sun, use the correct fertilizer, etc., you'll have simply wasted 25 years raising a crop of anemic, worthless trees. What's worse, it's not like you can just start giving the tree what it needs and then poof, the next day you have nutmeg. The damage is permanent. The trees will never bear fruit. You've simply wasted a crop. The same is sadly of men. You cannot raise men on a constant diet of telling them they're not needed, telling them they're the cause of society's problems, treating them unfairly, plying them with drugs, lying to them about women wanting democratic soy boy pussies, and then enabling them to collect a government check or live at home till they're 32. And then, suddenly, out of nowhere, throw a switch and poof, They're now a 33-year-old CPA competing in the local bodybuilding contest with 70% equity in a handsome home in an enviable neighborhood. These are the men you got. These are the men of your generation. They're not going to change. These are your men. Consequently, just like a nutmeg tree that doesn't bear fruit, certain key and critical dreams are not going to come true for the majority of women. The majority of women will never find a man they are truly in love with. The majority of women will never be taken care of again. The majority of women will not have her day. The majority of women will certainly not be a stay-at-home mom, no matter how dirty a secret desire that may be. The majority of women will not be sexually satisfied. And the majority of women will simply never have a mentally or financially stable man in their lives. You will have the Frankenstein soy boy Democrats you created. Yet it will still remain a Scooby-Doo mystery as to where have all the good men gone.